Welcome back to Higher Level Gaming. I'm Rob.
And I'm Katie.
And today we're talking about Rick and Morty. The show is finally back after a long hiatus, and we are excited to talk about what we thought about the very first episode of the 4th season. I feel like I was in a dream or something as I started the first episode. It was like too natural, almost like I didn't even notice that we had started and continued watching it. I was like half paying attention like I do when I rewatch episodes. I had to rewind it actually because I wasn't absorbing it, and it felt like I never left almost. Like I was waiting to see the Smiths sit down at breakfast all this time, or had been sitting with them in some corner of my mind waiting since the last season ended. After that moment of it being like way too casual, I snapped back and I was hanging on to every word. I loved all the little inside jokes, like when they were collecting the crystals. It kind of reminded me of when they were collecting the seeds that they put up Morty's butt. You remember in the first season?
Oh, yeah.
That was very similar to that. In that first episode in the first season, Morty like shoots one of the bug people in the leg, and he's like, I thought you said he wasn't real, but Rick's like, no, he's fascist, Morty. He's fascist.
Yeah,
it's pretty much the same thing. I thought it was hilarious that...
No, he said they're not human.
They're not human, right. Yeah, they're not human. He said, I thought you said they weren't human. And he's like, they're fascists. It's pretty much the same thing. And this episode actually had a lot to do with fascism. That was one of the major overarching themes. And that's kind of why we're making this review, because we do a lot of politics on our channel. They made fascism super funny in this episode. But just one parallel I thought was interesting, or actually not parallel, but like reflection of how far Morty has changed through all his adventures with Rick, is how Morty was like freaking out when he shot the dude, the bug dude, and he's like, dude, he has a family and kids, and Morty's like, ah.
Yeah.
It's funny that Morty now, he's killing all these soldiers and like doesn't even flinch, like not even a little bit, like just how hardened he's become going on all these adventures with Rick.
Yeah, we've seen him go from feeling extremely bad for hurting someone, killing a bunch of people for fun, and then just going full God mode in this episode.
Yeah, it's interesting how affected Morty's character has remained after everything they've been through. So as we said, there were a lot of references to fascist, like fascist Morty after he kills fascist Rick. He's like, no meta-narratives, no politics, just stick to the fun adventures.
Yeah, he kills him and he says he was too political.
They don't want Rick and Morty to be political. There are definitely people out there on like 4chan or elsewhere. Well, 4chan thinks they're too cool for Rick and Morty now, but there are definitely conservative, right-leaning people who are going to see this episode and, you know, all this criticism of pretty much conservatism or modern, really far-right conservatism, and they're maybe not going to be too pleased because they just want to go on simple Rick and Morty adventures where they stick seeds up Morty's butt.
Yeah, they don't want any meta commentary.
Things are kind of different now, not just with Morty, but the family has set up boundaries for what the process is like for their adventures.
That was really weird, right? Like, because when we first started the episode, I felt like I was watching something I had already seen. Mm-hmm. But when Beth asked him to, like, you know, ask for permission to grab Morty, it was just so strange because that's so different than everything that's happened up until now. And it's kind of funny and ironic because, like, even though she's setting up these boundaries, Rick still like snatches the fuck out of Morty and like pulls him along,
ragdolls him.
So it shows that like nothing has actually really changed.
Right, they've got these like very fragile boundaries they've set up, but I mean, I'm sure that's going to be a source of contention and conflict later in the season. Rick obviously doesn't like this new arrangement. He's talking about it while they're getting the death crystals, and then Morty kills Rick accidentally by crashing the car while he's trying to chase down his future life with Jessica. That was really funny. And then Hologram Rick shows up, and he was a highlight of the whole episode. He was just absolutely incredible and hilarious. He had a lot to say about how different people are treated based upon their appearance. He was also clearly a joke and kind of made light of it, but not really. The fact that he's the tolerant, really good Rick And he even says, like, I'm programmed to be tolerant and wants equality wasn't an accident. The protesting and the legalize it sign that Berkeley Hologram Rick is holding up, like, all these things are very political ideas that Hologram Rick are expressing.
Yeah, and he even says to Morty, like, I'm willing to accept that you're doing this if you're willing to accept that you need to stop it right now.
Exactly, dude. It's so on the nose. Fascist Rick also calls our Rick liberal when he's like, yes, I'm a fascist. He's like, that yes was a little liberal.
Yeah.
It's clear that the Nazi fascists and isolationists are going to be uncomfortable with all of the subtext in this episode. Be careful what you wish for was the main message from Morty. Morty wasn't careful enough. Like, he's doing all these crazy things to end up with Jessica when he's an old man. And he even at some point, like, Jessica's like, we're going to go skinny dipping. This is the last time I'm going to be speaking with my clothes on. And Morty's like, no, I'm sure we'll get together later in life, because the crystal is like, that's not what you're supposed to do, Morty.
Yeah, he totally loses out on his chance because he's so set on this, like, goal in mind, like the certain way that things have to be done.
The idea of being with Jessica at the end of his life is more important to Morty than actually being with Jessica, which is what, if he really thought about it, is what he wants anyway. So it just goes to show that you have to be careful about what you're pursuing in life in some ways. When Rick shows up and finds out Shrimp Rick is also a fascist, he said, when did this shit become the default? Now, this is obviously a dig at the rise of right-wing authoritarianism again, and how, like, being a fascist can sometimes feel like it's becoming the default in a lot of ways in our own world. Like, a lot of countries now, their governments have been taken over by really right-wing kind of idiots like Boris Johnson in the UK. Yes. And it almost seems like, yeah, maybe fascism is the default. There was the dicks on the math board, classic Rick and Morty visual gag in the background. This show is really good at including all these little jokes, like, in the background of the scenes. One episode that really stands out is the episode with all the imaginary creatures that are, like, part of the Rick and Morty family, but they're not. They're just the parasites, and they're, like, filling up the house. There was so much detail in that episode, like, with the background characters and all the things that were going on there. The show has always been really good at just incorporating comedy in every layer. Hologram Rick tells Morty, please tell me you're not hitting that crystal again. That was really funny. That was kind of like, obviously, a crystal meth joke.
Right, yeah.
But it shows, you know, you can't, again, this is that central theme. You can't always be worried about where you're going and what you're trying to end up as. You have to kind of go with the flow in life sometimes. And the things that you're willing to do when you are in pursuit of this idealistic goal can be horrible things, like all the murder that Morty gets up to in this episode. On the news at one point, this anchor, one of the standout jokes of the episode again was this anchor that says gaslighting doesn't exist, you made it up because you're fucking crazy, which is obviously him gaslighting the other chick on the show. And then they come back to the gaslighting when Morty cold reads the judge and he makes her believe that he's a psychic and somehow communicating with her husband beyond, like, death. And Morty is literally, like, gaslighting her and ruining her life, and then she actually kills herself. She says in the end, I'm coming, and he's dead, so the only way she's going to be able to do that is if she kills herself. So he literally kills her, and that just shows how dangerous, you know, going to psychics and putting all your trust in these supernatural things are, and how dangerous it is to lie to people about reality.
Yeah, that just shows how serious gaslighting really is, right? Because, like, you can literally make someone believe something that's crazy that could potentially harm them.
This is also relevant to the whole fake news things. You can tell this was an extremely political episode. Then seeing Morty continue to cold read his way through the whole mess, like on TV and etc., just walking around, like, stumbling and making vowel noises, like, that shit was so funny. I was dying laughing during all of those parts. Then Wasp Rick also draws a parallel with our own world when he says, watch out, drop the Hitler stuff. Wasp Morty has been on some crazy message boards lately, which is clearly a reference to the edgy kids who end up as racist assholes because of places like 4chan and the high content of conservative racism therein. And then again, heading back into identity politics when Rick comes back, he runs into Rick, and Rick is accused of trying to take over and steal Rick's place, and Rick is like, what is this Isaac Asimov racist AI bullshit? It's so funny because, yeah, we have this assumption and this distrust of Rick because, like, he is a machine, and this is supposed to clearly be a placeholder for, like, actual race or identity politics.
Yeah.
There has honestly probably never been this political of a Rick and Morty episode before, and I loved it.
Yeah, I loved it too, and honestly, I think you're right. I don't think they've ever been as political as they have been in this episode.
If you follow us, you'll know that we're all about representation and politics in games, actually, and that's our focus on this channel, so this episode was really right up our alley. The ending with Rick becoming a huge fucking asshole illustrates how once you're the one in power, once you have the upper hand, that power can just as easily corrupt you, just as the death crystal corrupted Morty because it's too much power being able to see what your death is going to be like. And that goes to show that, like, let's take race for an example. White people aren't evil intrinsically because they're white. They've done evil things in the United States and elsewhere with colonialism because they were powerful. It's not the fact that they were just evil by virtue of being white. It's the fact that they had advantages technologically that made it really easy to kill and murder people. And when you're in a position of power over people, the temptation to be corrupted, that allure of power, is enough to turn anyone, even someone who's, picketing, into an evil person. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Jerry's Akira line at the ending, also amazing. I don't want to see any more Animu stuff happen to my son.
He said like Eminem or some shit.
I want to see more enemy. And the whole moral at the end of the story for Rick and Morty is, you gotta do a little of this, a little of that. You can do political videos like this, but also classic Rick and Morty adventures too. Rick and Morty conclude to plan ahead, but you should live in the moment. Enjoy it as you go and go with the flow, but also have a heading. Don't just float through any storm or climb over any mountain to get where you're going.
I'm really excited to see what they're gonna be doing in the future episodes, and I hope that they're going to be including more of Summer, because I feel like at the end of the episode they kind of alluded to like her feeling left out, and how like she basically is starting to be like resentful because Morty and Rick always leave her out. And then there was last season, they did like include her a little bit more, so I feel like we're probably gonna see more of her this season than before.
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna see as much of her because now she's been put into the kind of Jerry zone in the show. She's kind of this annoying background character for Rick and Morty again after being fleshed out and really brought to the forefront last season for a few episodes. So it'll be interesting to see if Summer has as big a role to play this season.
Yeah, I hope that they kept fleshing her out because I really did enjoy those episodes.
Well, that was a lot of thoughts. That was maybe half of an episode's worth of thoughts for Rick and Morty, just analyzing it. It's been really fun to kind of dig into the messages that they were saying, and why don't you go ahead and give us a like if you enjoyed it, and maybe we'll make some more videos like this one. But above all else, guys, don't forget to go play some video games and have a nice day.